Hello, hello. Thank you, moderators, for being here. Let's get that sound check out the way really fast. Let's see. Oh, already got a blessing waiting in the chamber. Thank you. I do want to give a special thanks out to my community. A lot of you reached out. Listen, you've done a fantastic job of helping me replenish the money I lost in defending myself in court. Listen, I appreciate it. I got an awesome, absolutely dynamite community. I really think half of my illustrations have already sold. Half of those illustrations, and then the other half was just donations. It doesn't even matter. Some people donated $2. Some people donated $50. I got some $100 donations in there. I believe somebody even $500 in coffees. Hey, every bit of that helps. I appreciate it. I'm not putting any links in this one. That was 3 videos back, but I just wanted to recuperate my losses from that. And yeah, man, I've got nothing but respect for my community. They're awesome. They're awesome people. So we have an interesting topic because this is the Western world. In the Western world, we don't really have exposure to this type of information, and the information that we get comes through many filters. This is the problem with the inception of the Archaix research. I have had to amend my opinion, change my trajectory, because my Southern Baptist programming had always tripped me up and had me going down rabbit holes that wasted years of my life. So, you know what? When we begin to explore new territories, we have to do so from a blank slate. You cannot bring your predilections. You can't bring this baggage you brought in. That's why I tell people all the time: if you're coming to Archaix, leave your preconceptions at the door. Whatever it is that you have formerly believed, leave that at the door so you can process this information. I don't care. On the way out, pick that backpack up and carry it around until it's too heavy and you realize you've been carrying that weight for nothing. I don't care what you do away from Archaix. But inside Archaix, don't bring that baggage in here because it doesn't belong. This is where we strip everything away and go back to the core fundamentals. And it's where we find that when we're looking at fundamentals, we find that there are many differences all throughout the world in between philosophies and socio-political systems and religions and mystical beliefs. These differences are there, but the differences are only in degree. They're really not fundamental the further we go back. So Affy Hussein is somebody I've been collaborating with for a while. She has sent me a lot of material in the past. I've gone through it. PDFs on Islam, on prophecies, eschatology from a Muslim perspective. Just she sent me PDFs full of a bunch of different surahs and stuff. Kind of hard for me to find. My copy of the Quran does not have any chapters. It has no verses. It has no surahs. My chapter of the Quran, my copy of the Quran is from 1803. And from back to front, it's one text all the way through. So, she's opened my eyes up to some things. So I've already talked to her before, but never on YouTube. And we've talked in private on Zoom. So I want to introduce. I don't have any other announcements except Virginia Beach. You're either going to be there or you're not. It'll be my very first OFIS presentation. That's only because OFIS has everything to do with not event prediction, but event generation. And we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about how to apply the Archaix principles in real time to people's personal, individual situations. We're not doing anything theoretical. We're going to find out what your problems are at Virginia Beach, what your goals are at Virginia Beach. And we're going to apply the Archaix principles, and I'm going to show you some software that is absolutely paradigm shattering. It's based off the SHAR system. It's amazing. So, anyway, without further ado, Affy Hussein, how are you doing, young lady?
Hey, how you doing, guys? How are you doing, Jason?
So, hey, start by telling my community where you're from, or sure. Where are you at right now?
I am currently in Surrey, UK, very close to London. So I'm not out into Surrey, but I'm quite close to the London sort of Surrey borders. So yeah, I was born and raised here. So I've been here. So for, I'm not going to give my age away, but nearly 47 years. 30th September, I'll be 47. So yeah, 47 years. I was born and raised here in the UK. So it's now 8:15 in the evening here. It's gone a bit dark. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Victoria, she's one of my moderators and a long time listener of Archaix. She's always reminded me, Jason, don't start your videos too late. I'm in the UK. Don't be starting your videos too late. Yeah.
It's like when you sent me the email this morning saying, I'm going to do 4 p.m. Central Time. And I was like, I'm kind of in bed by then. That's like 10 o'clock. So I normally sit in bed watching your videos when they come on live. So yeah. But thank you so much for having me here, because I do think it, like you said in your introduction, it is a very important topic, I think, that needs to be discussed, really.
Of course. You know what? I need to turn this machine off. Hold on. Oh yeah. Now that's a really good silence right there. I like that.
I've been Paolo Santoing my room just so to clear the energy. So I've been using this Paolo Santo stick and burning it and just going around, get all the bad energies go away before I start speaking.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is, but
I think it's South American.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that like smudging, like sage ceremonies?
Absolutely, it's exactly the same. So I have white sage. I normally have it like delivered from America. My sister is actually in Wyoming at the moment, and she was telling me how it was just growing everywhere around there. And I think Colorado. I think she's gone to Yellowstone 2 days ago. But yeah, she said it was growing everywhere. So the best sage, obviously, you get in America, white sage, and I think Palo Santo also. And I'm sure people in the community will probably know loads about it because it's one of the cleansing sort of smudges that you can use.
Okay. So let me start with a couple of questions I have real quick.
Okay.
A little background. In prison, I had ordered 2 different Qurans. It was 2 different translations of Qurans. Both of them came gold. You know how the Qurans come sometimes. They got gold leaves, gold gilt. They're really elaborate books. They take a lot of pride. They put the gold in the leaves and the pages. And yours has been really researched. So it was leather bound. It was super nice. It had tassels to lock it.
They're really ornate, aren't they? Some of them you can have
super ornate. It was like architecture. The first one I got was like architecture book. So I had read it from back to front. It was divided into surahs and verses and all that. So I was doing research on I wanted to know everything about Iblis, Idris, the Ad, the Thamud. I wanted to see if there was any stories of Sodom and Gomorrah, if I find any evidence whatsoever. Because back then, when I read the Quran, I was looking for evidence that my beliefs in the Old Testament were true. Mm. So that's the sole reason I read it. So, and that was back then. Today, I would read it for totally different reasons. But I wanted to know about the Ad and the Thamud, ancient civilizations, these megalith builders and all that. So,
and what did you find out when you sort of looked at it? What did you glean from
that? I found out many things. That when it comes to the Quranic writings, I didn't find much difference. Difference in narratives, difference in stories, difference in the epithets, what they called people, but it's the same. It was still Abraham, it's still Sarah, it's still Enoch, it's still Satan, and it's still the same characters, some of the same histories, but one fundamental that jumped out to me was the angel revelations that are found all throughout the Old Testament. They're also in the Quran. Mm-hmm. The angels literally talk to themselves in the Quran and explain why they did these things in the realms of men. The same thing. That's what we have in Genesis. In Genesis, supposedly angels are discussing a situation about mankind building a construction that's going to breach heaven, and they've got to stop it. So they create 70 languages so they couldn't finish the construction project. It's called a tower, but it's actually a construction. It's a building with a function. The function is to breach heaven. So I believe in the pyramid. I believe in the Great Pyramid. That's what it was never finished. So this
and I think that's where my interest in your stuff came about, actually, because what the Quran does really, really nicely for us from a historical perspective is, like, as you said, it does mention all these stories, but for me, it was the detail, the meat behind that. Like, okay, so what actually happened? So it kind of gives you like headlines. It gives you like a headline story, but it doesn't really go deep into it, right? There's certain stories that it does go deep into, but certain ones not. And what I find really interesting is how little is mentioned about Enoch, who is obviously known as Idris. And that's quite interesting because I think a lot of it has been sort of distorted and covered up. So I think a lot of the stories that the Muslim community, I don't necessarily think I'm part of that anymore. So that's another topic. But the Muslim community do sort of believe in these stories, right? And I think that their version of that story is very much aligned with the biblical stories. But fast forward to my personal journey, that's what I discovered was completely different. So those things exist there, they are there, but there's a lot of correcting that's going on, it seems, from the narrative, right? So a lot of things. So this is where my interest in your work came, because, for example, you have brought to light the fact that, you know, the Israelites during Babylon, for example, they had, you know, looked at the libraries and then they created those stories that then became Genesis, Torah, and that religion that we know as today as Judaism. And in the Quran, it does call out, you know, the children of Israel for distorting the word. So there's information around that, which I feel is kind of interesting given what you found, right? Because I grew up very much, you know, with a lot of indoctrination like you into the Muslim religion. So I grew up, you know, woke up and I'm in a Muslim family. And, you know, I'm being told X, Y, Z, and I'm being told that's the truth. And now you have to believe that, right? And a lot of the stories were very, very similar to the biblical ones. And because my personal background is that I went to a Catholic school with nuns in it, that's another story. But you can see how the journey, my personal journey, was very much about inquiry. It wasn't so the point at which I started studying the Quran was at the point where I'd kind of already come to the conclusion that something's not quite right. And I need to really look at this myself. Like I need to just block the noise out. And now I need to actually look at the text. Like, what does the text say? Like, why do I have to cover my hair? Why is my husband allowed to have 4 wives? You know what I mean? Why are people getting their heads chopped off? Like, what is all this jihad stuff? Like, I don't understand. Like, my God, the God that I think is God, wouldn't be condoning that stuff, right? So there was a lot of contradiction growing up, like what I would see. And that, I think that's where my initial inquiry came from. Like, that's the angle that I was coming from. It was really about truth. So there's a lot of sort of, I think from a background perspective, it probably makes sense, I think, because it is a sensitive topic. And I think it's really important that, especially your audience, and so who I think are people who have already come to some certain conclusions, right? So I'm quite comfortable to share this stuff with you guys because I feel I'm part of that community and I feel this is a safe place for me to do that. And I know you have enough moderators that any nonsense comes in, you guys will kick them out. But I'm not a public person, and it's not something that I've ever really wanted to sort of go out there and sort of, you know, have a channel and all that. So that's not my thing. My thing is I wanted to know the truth. I went on a journey and I think I discovered some truths. And along that, and then once that happened, I then started looking at other things. So my journey was very much initiated and started with the Quran, but I didn't sort of stop there. So because the Quran very clearly has verses in there which tell you that everything is in the written record. And I know you say that a lot. And I love that because it really stuck out to me. And that was one of the verses which made me then go and look at, you know, the Vedas, Torah, the Bible in a bit more detail. I mean, I'm not an expert in any of them. I'm not claiming to be one, but I definitely went and read them. Like I read the Nag Hammadi library, all the St. Thomas Gospel, all of the different sort of texts, Hermetica and blah, 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 all the good ones that you know, right? So once I went on that really long journey, which started when I was probably in my late 20s, because I just got divorced and I had 2 kids. So I was like, this life is a bit shit. So it was a bit of a self-inquiry really, because I was like, well, this can't be right. Like, I'm not going out like this. There's got to be more to this whole experience than what I can understand. So it first started off as very much as a plea to like make some sense of this world, right? And then it kind of then went into, hang on. So the very first time I read the Quran, I was like, it doesn't say anything about X, or it doesn't say anything about Y. But that's what we're told that we're supposed to do. So where is all this coming from? So that's kind of the background of, how I came onto this journey. But, obviously there's a lot of things that happened before that sort of led me there. And I know you've spoken a lot about your accident, for example. So I had similar experiences. So I was 10 years old when I was knocked down by a car. But the one thing that I remember very clearly was that moment that it hit, I was in some kind of euphoric state. Like I had no pain. There was no, and there was all these people around me, and I was all like, very like, this is nice, sort of thing. So those kind of experiences, I had quite a lot of those throughout the journey, which kind of, I think, made me realize that there's something, this is where I am is not quite what people tell me where I am. There's something more to this whole reality than what it is from a very young age. So that's kind of my background, and that's kind of where the journey started. But the reality is that for the audiences that are watching today, I think the clear message needs to be that the Quran is a body of, as a text, right? There's a text there, we can read it, and we can get a dictionary, and we can actually use lexicons and do translations, and very quickly, like with the other scriptures, like you've read, for example, you can come to some conclusions about, hang on, this is what we're being told in the mainstream isn't really what we're seeing is actually in this particular text. There's a lot of tradition around it. Yes. I know you've mentioned the Hadith a few times. And I've gone in and I've looked at the Hadith. And one of the first parts of my journey was I couldn't find much of what was in the Hadith in the Quran. I mean, there are things that are aligned to it, but a lot of it wasn't. And I started thinking, hang on, like if this is supposed to be the main body of what they call the Sunnah, which is the way of the Prophet. So the sayings and the ways of the Prophet is collected in this book that called the collection of the Hadith, right? And the Hadith, if you look at it from a chronological perspective, was written 200 years after the Prophet, supposedly the Prophet died, right? So there's 2 centuries have gone past, and now suddenly you've got this whole body of work, which is giving you all these laws, which is telling us everything. And without that in the mainstream, just so everyone knows, as a Muslim, apparently you can't touch the Quran because you don't have the knowledge or the ability or the, I don't know, piousness or whatever you want to call it to even touch that text and understand it. So you do have to go through, depending on what sort of sect you're in or whatever, you have to go through the Hadith, or if it's the Shiites, it will be their particular traditions, and then the imams or the priest or the clergy, let's say, right? And then you get your information, and you're like sitting there going, well, why can't I just read this? So that's kind of what the traditional sort of mainstream view of Islam is that you need to follow these books called the Hadith, right? So when I started going into the Quranic text, I was like, well, there's nothing here. And the word Hadith means stories. Okay, so that's the actual translation of the word. It means stories. So funnily enough, there are verses in the Quran that says, do not sit and listen to the idle stories that are going to be created. You have the source here. The source is speaking to you and giving you the information. So it kind of warns the reader against these sort of false tales that might be, sort of coming about because of this revelation, let's say, right? So that kind of got me thinking, and I was like, okay. And then the other part of the Hadith was that the guy who wrote the Hadith was a guy who was from Bukhara, which is in Russia. So he's not even anywhere near geographically to Mecca or the Arabian Peninsula, really. So this guy has now come through, and he's come into Mecca, and he's collected all the, all of the Hadith and all the sayings, as they say, because they were apparently oral, and he collects them. And then I think they said there was over, I don't know how many thousands, but I think there was over 60,000, or I think there's quite a very high number, but then he whittled it down to only 5,000, which he would say that are authentic, which are now in those books, right? Now, I think there's truth in the books. I'm not completely throwing them out the window, but what I'm saying is that the Quranic text and what you find as a religion that we see being practiced in the mainstream is very different and completely not the message of what you find when you go in and read the Quran. Because the first opening lines of the Quran are, this is a book for mankind, meaning the human kind, right? So people, beings, human beings. And it is about those who believe in the bil ghaib. Bil ghaib means the hidden, the metaphysical, right? So it's not really, so it's kind of almost like the reader has to be at a certain level of understanding of the realm that they're in to even sort of grasp what this is going to tell you about, because this is for someone who's been on that journey, got shot down and been like, this is all crap, then come up, found some knowledge and been like, okay, this is all lies. So now we're going to, you know, we can, I don't like using the word awakened, but they have awakened to some truths, right? And now, and then now the Quran is being addressed to that person who I believe is what in our community, in your community, are called errants. Because everything in that, every other line in the verse in the Quran, at the end of it, it says, this is for those who understand. And as you start sort of going through the text, you start sort of finding that this character that's central, who is supposed to be the, I guess, the writer of this, which is God, or they call him Allah, okay? The description or the context of this Allah is very different to what I think is what we have understood. Because from reading the Quran from a perspective of someone who's already kind of done a lot of research and kind of gone in, you realize that it's talking about the human consciousness, right? So the supreme consciousness, or the spirit that is within each one of us, as you say, I've heard you say that many times, right? That we are made in the image of God, or whatever you want to say. Now, in the Quran, there's other verses where they'll say, I'm about Allah, that I'm closer to you than your jugular vein. So that makes you sit there and go, well, what's closer than my bloody jugular vein? You know what I mean? So you've got to be inside me to be closer to being that. So there's a lot of verses that you sort of start realizing that, hang on, this is talking about something completely different. And what's beautiful about it is that there are layers. So depending on, and I think I've heard you say this before, and I was like, yes, because depending on the level of perception that you're coming in at and you're reading anything really, the understanding of that will be very much around, you know, based on your level of perception, right? And what the Quran openly says, as this book is there to guide people, but at the same time, it is also there to misguide people. So it's very open, it's very clear, because it's talking about consciousness. So if you are, do you see what I mean? So the whole text is what
you're describing a cipher. You're describing a cipher. You're describing a body, a corpus of information. If you're looking for the metaphor, if you're looking for the metaphorical, you're going to find metaphors. If you're looking for allegory, you're going to find allegories. If you're looking for parables, you're going to find symbolic meanings. If you're looking for a some type of philosophical understanding of the text is specifically designed to provide you philosophical interpretations. If you're looking for a historicity, you will find nuggets in there that are supported in the historical record. What you're describing about the Quran is what I say about the Bible. It is a supernatural book, but it is full of good and evil, and it was designed that way. And these ancient texts that are like this, to where people actually glean from them what they're putting into them. The reason it works is because only in a simulated context could that be possible. If Michael Drosnin's Bible code can find real codes using computer software embedded in the Masoretic text and pull them out, and they have predictive value, it's because that's what he's looking for, and the simulation will feed that to him. Yeah, the Quran is going to be a multi-layered text just like the Bible was. And you perfectly described the beginning of Christianity when you were describing the 200-year period between the original Quranic text, Mohammedan beliefs, and the Hadith, because I don't want to offend the Muslim culture at all.
Nor do I.
But I'm also a stickler for the truth, and I know they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it.
Someone's got to tell him.
Islam was hijacked by Judaism, and a lot of the Islamic texts were rewritten by Jews, and a lot of the Islamic beliefs are Judaic as control mechanisms. And it's sad. I've had arguments with Muslims about it. They just can't see it. They don't even understand that Mecca was changed from Becca, the ancient holy city of Petra, when the earliest Islamic holy shrines were at Petra. And then when they rewrote the Quran, they changed Becca, which was Petra in Jordan, to Mecca, a whole other city for which had no value prior to Muhammad.
Exactly, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought the Petra thing up, because my first round of studies in the Quran, when I was still not, I felt like my perception wasn't still where it is today, right? So I'm still going in there from a kind of a 3D perspective or a material perspective. So I'm sort of looking at, like you were saying, looking at geographical things to prove what's saying in the Quran, so I can be like, yeah, see, it's the, geographically it's right there. But when I started looking, I had a very rude awakening, because I was like, hang on, he's talking about around him there's olive trees and all this stuff, and I'm like, there's no olive trees in Saudi Arabia, so like, what are they talking about? Then it talks about how you walk day and night past the main road, and if you go and look at ancient trade road, and if you go and look at ancient maps, you see that there is the King's Road, or I think it was called the King's Road, I can't remember what it's called, but there was a road that went all the way up from sort of Jordan, and then it just went all the way up, and it was kind of it wasn't the Silk Route per se, but I think it was some avenue of the Silk Route. But there was that was in Petra, because you can actually see that in the maps. So a lot of what they say, like, it does allude to Petra, and that was the first thing that I discovered. So that was my first sort of like, oh my God, I found something sort of moment, where I thought the geographics are completely different. So this is not talking about what we now today know as the place of where Muhammad was born, but we don't have enough proof, and that's the biggest problem that I have with Islam, or the Muslim religion that we see today. I would say not Islam, because I do believe Islam is like you said, it's a supernatural book. It's coming from source. Who it came to, I'm still, let's just call him Muhammad, because that's what everyone thinks. So yeah, let's just say there was a guy called Muhammad, and he had these revelations, and this is real text. But the reality of the situation is that I have a real issue with it, because even with the Quranic, that is in the internal Islamic community, there's big debates around these topics, right? So it's not something that's not discussed. So it's not that they're blindly following it. There are lots of different fractions, there's lots of different ideas. And one of those is the fact that they can't find anything from the moment of, up to, I think, 90 Hijri, which is 90 years after he moved to Medina, was when the first Islamic sort of historical records started coming out that mentioned these sort of guy,
It's exact. You're describing precisely how the original Christian documents were forged. They were all a century after the events they depict. And it was all invented. It was all created. And the best way to invent a lie is mix it with real historical facts that can be verified, such as there really was a governor named Pontius Pilate. I mean, there really was a Sanhedrin. There really was this city here. This festival really did occur at this time. There really was a lunar solar eclipse at 3 BC that could have been seen over Palestine. When you take actual facts and then weave a fiction in them, it makes the fiction more powerful ex post facto. Hundreds of years later, people assume the fiction is true because of the facts that are attached to it. This is precisely how Christianity was started.
Exactly. And I think I'm now coming to those conclusions, and this is quite recently. I've sort of been connected with a few people that have sort of like me gone down that road of researching and just putting the dogmas aside and saying, look, I just want the truth. And, they're alluding to the fact, I'm going to say this out loud and get my head chopped off, but I'm going to say it because, like you, I'm a sucker for the truth. There is some people who think that the Islam might have been a creation by Templars, for example. So some of these Gnostic-y type, illuminated type sort of secret cults that exist. So like you say, there's good guys and there's bad guys, right? So you've got the good guys too, and then they had their own secret societies. And what I discovered in my research, sort of a few years ago, when I was going deeper into this, is that there was actually in that Arabian Peninsula a big ideology that had been bubbling for quite a while, which today we can call it Islam, and they sort of put a label on it and said, right, this is now Islam. But the ideology of the base ideology was bubbling there. So it was very rife in terms of, from a geopolitical perspective, it was sort of perfectly ripe for someone to come in and actually just say, right, we can really do this again. Meaning, when I say do this again, meaning how Christianity was formed or how Judaism was formed. So I personally think that the religion we see today being practiced is definitely a control mechanism, right? We know that it's a control mechanism. It's dungeon programming, it really is. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. So I think,
what is the Hijra year right now? Is it 1446?
God, no idea. I can have
Not sure. Do you have software that tells you what Hijra year it is?
Yeah, hang on.
It should be 1,446 years since the beginning of the Hijra calendar.
You are
right?
My friend. You are spot on. It is 1446 AH.
Okay. The reason I didn't just calculate that in my head. The reason I know that is because I'll be doing a video in the near future about the year 2025 and what the year 2025 means on all the world's calendars, because it's a massive geopolitical synchronization of calendars from all over the world. It's 2025, and and with Islam, it's the year 1447.
Yeah,
our Anno Domini year of 2025 is 1447. which is Anno Hijra, which is the Hijra calendar. This is the Islamic calendar, and the reason it's very important is because attached to this belief system, the number 1447 in the Old Testament was when the Israelites finally made their escape out of Egypt during a terrible cataclysmic period that was in 10 stages. Well, with this belief comes this Gog and Magog force from the north, and here's what's really strange, and it involves next year. And then we can go on. I just want to bring this to your attention.
Great. I love it when you do this.
I want to bring this to your attention because this, to me, prophecy is programming. Eschatology is merely the ability of a soul inside the programming to see the programming for what it is. It's a different dynamic than prophets and prophecy and the spirit letting me see all these things. That's not what's happening here. It's not. This is all programming. And yes, it's spiritual programming, and it requires a spiritual person to be able to decipher it. Yeah. But it's all in the field, and it's right there. The biblical material is codified. And when it talks about Gog and Magog, and it is so strange because in the book of Ezekiel, an Israelite, not a Judaic, an Israelite prophet of the north. Judaic prophets were of the south. The northern prophet Ezekiel, this man in Ezekiel chapter 37, 38, and 39 lays out very specific war that's going to happen in the last days. That war is going to involve two peoples geographically identified from the north called Gog and Magog, but they're going to unify and empower. This is like Russia and Ukraine. They're going to unify and empower several peoples in the Middle East. And when Ezekiel listed all 11 countries in the Middle East that were going to participate in this massive war against Israel, every one of those 11 countries were different kingships, different frontiers. They spoke different languages. They had different histories. Some of them had just migrated in. Others, none of them were related to each other. Some of them were different races. When he made this prophecy over 2,400 years ago, there was no common denominators between these 11 countries. Today, all 11 countries are Islamic. And it's a massive war against Israel called the invasion of Gog and Magog, and its linkage with 1447 is not good. Meaning, it's going to really look like they're kicking ass, and they have succeeded, and they've done exactly what they wanted to do. And right when they start celebrating, all hell breaks loose, and they have literally marched into a trap.
Wow. Well, let's see it all unfold, right? Get the popcorn out. That's what I say, because and there's a part of me that sort of sits there and sort of thinks about it, because like in the Quran, it clearly says about, what I think is probably the Anuna guys, like the Anunnaki and those people who obviously are the same sort of bloodlines that are still sort of controlling, the elites. I would say, I think they are. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's kind of where my head goes with it. And, I sometimes feel like they are, it's like, because they've sort of made these distortions almost in the scripture, they're almost making them happen. Like they know, you see what I mean? So because they already have that knowledge. And that's what the Quran keeps telling us, that these people have all the knowledge, but they withhold the knowledge from us, right? And that's kind of what we see that's happened. So there's lots of different angles in terms of like this sort of prophecy side of things. But in the Quranic text, it doesn't really allude to any of this. So all of this sort of prophecies that we hear, they come up, and I think this is where I think that, it's all coming from where you're saying. It's all coming from the Bible. It's coming from those previous texts. And I think because the religion that we see today, which is being practiced, is an invention by those same people. That's what I believe after reading the Quran. So I don't find that information in the Quran. But what you do find in the Quran is the Phoenix phenomena, which I love. You find that in the Quran. And that's one of the things that I sort of, again, was another thing that was really aligned with what you were talking about. And I think it was just after COVID 2020 or 2021 when I started sort of looking at your videos and things. The first thing I said was like, shit, this is all in the Quran. That this is what this guy is saying. I've actually read it. Like it talks about the sky going red. It talks about all the different sort of descriptions that you've kind of given. It's very big on warning. It's almost like it's warning us that, look, these things are coming. And what's really interesting to me is that, a lot of the historical narratives that have been corrected, another one which I haven't brought up because it is controversial, and I know you've brought it up before, is the creation of Christianity, right? And in the Quran, it calls that out. So some of the things that I've seen as themes that are really aligned with you is the resets, the whole story of the immortal soul, the immortal within, because a lot of what they've done with what we know as Sharia, it's not talking about physical stuff. There's it's just not. And the Sharia that you find, that you see is being practiced, I personally feel is very, very biblical, or you can even say, Judaic. So like you said, the influence is Judaic and Christianity in what you see being practiced. But I don't think that it's aligned to actually what the Quranic message really was. Because what the Quranic message was, whoever, Muhammad, it's really important to sort of look at the narrative of his story, because that for me really put things into perspective, because my own personal journey was quite sort of a matching, because you've got trauma at a young age. He was an orphan. Then he moves on, in that environment. When you're an orphan, obviously it's not going to be an easy childhood, is it? You're going to be sort of pushed from pillar to post. And, he's adopted by this person, and that person said, right, now I'll adopt you. So he's grown up without parents. So that's the first part of his, and this is mainstream history. So I'm not sort of, anyone can go and look at the life of Muhammad and find that story. Then the next part of it is that he then becomes a trader because his uncle was a trader. So, okay, so in those days, where did the traders go? They were going to Syria. They were going all over the Silk Route, right? So they are traveling. He was known to be one of the best traders. He emerged as one of the great traders because he really sort of grew the business. So that
the King's Road that you were talking about, that famous road called the King's Road, that goes right through Petra. It goes right through Jordan, and the ancient King's Road. It's from the King's Road that you can literally see the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Dead Sea valleys. King's Road is ancient, but that's the spice trade. That was a part of the ancient spice trade. It is a trade route.
Frankincense and all of that stuff, right? They used to take from Yemen and all those places. You're talking about?
No, one second. I just want to answer this guy's question before we move on, because he asked it twice in the deal. Jonathan Weston, I didn't mean to be vague. The Gog and Magog eschatology is pretty clear. two major northern forces are going to empower 11 countries in the Middle East. When the prophecy was made, those 11 countries had nothing in common. Now, today, all 11 of them are Islamic. And in the text, all 11 of them attack Israel. And in the text, all 11 of them are literally winning the war and doing everything. They're unstoppable. And at the last second, all 11 armies are eliminated and Israel is spared. And I'm not with either side. I'm trying to remain as neutral as possible. I've already got enough attention against me because everybody thinks I'm just totally anti-Semitic. So I'm just gonna refrain from commenting on it. But it's a trap. It's a trap. And according to the prophecy, they're literally led into this trap intentionally, like a vast sacrifice. We already know who employs those tactics.
Yeah, it's crazy though, isn't it? Right. So when you sort of look at it from this vantage point where we are sitting, and you've got all these proofs that you've kind of brought to light, and then you start putting it all together, it's kind of absolutely mental what's going on if you think about it, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it is really important for people because there is clearly impressions about Islam, and I'm like I said to you when we spoke earlier, that I'm not here to be an apologist at all, because what you see as mainstream, I myself, as someone who was born into a Muslim family, like I myself have kind of sort of retreated out of that, and I don't practice that. I don't do those practices. I've been to Mecca 3 times in my life. Like apparently I went when I was really young. I still have flashes and remember it, but after my teenage years, I never went there. And I can categorically say that when I went there, I didn't feel what you're supposed to feel, I guess, right? So I was just like, what are these people doing? Because when you are growing up as a Muslim, what's hammered into your head is that idol worshippers are the worst, and idol worshipping is terrible, and you can't worship idols. And it's all about idol worshipping, blah, 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 blah. And then you get to Mecca. Sorry, I'm going to laugh at this. But you get to Mecca and you see these people going around this, the box.
Yeah. The cube of Saturn. The black cube of Saturn. I already know.
Right. So you're like, right. So what is this called in your world then, if it's not idol worshipping? Because that is something which is an idol or a building or whatever you want to call it. And you're going around it, and then you kiss it and you do all sorts of weird things. And then during Hajj, I think it was this year, my brother sent me the most funniest reel. They've got this part of the Hajj pilgrimage. They've got this one particular tradition. I mean, it's not, it's not supposed to be part. I think it is part of the Hadith and all those things. I don't know where it came from, but there's a place where they believe that during the month of Hajj, which is one of the months in the Muslim calendar, when everyone goes to the pilgrimage, there's a place where apparently Satan is locked up for that whole month. So he's got a holiday, but he's locked up. And he's locked up and he's tied against some weird pillar thing. And people especially go there. And the reel that was sent to me was this guy who had this huge rocks, and he was running up like he was like, in the Olympics or something, like he was going to do a javelin throw. And he was so passionate about it. And he was so intense. And he was going and throwing these rocks at it, because you can go and throw rocks or things at the devil, because apparently he's locked up there for the whole month. And I'm like sitting there going like, are you like, is this supposed to be a joke or something? Like, it's like I've got to that stage now where I'm like, I just can't. I won't indulge.
Well, I get it. I came from that world. I came from that world where the devil made me do it. Or I came from that world where I literally believed that there was a devil and he was responsible for all the sin in the world. I get it, but it's I want to go back and comment on the how would you like to hear a chronological breakdown of how Islam came about?
It would be good, and then I think it would be
perfectly with the Phoenix phenomenon. It literally happened because of one of the worst Phoenix episodes ever.
Please enlighten us. I would love to hear that.
So we all know that the ancient world kind of died in 1135 BC and started what was called the Great Mediterranean Dark Age. This isn't just my conclusion. There are scholars that have their own YouTube videos out that talk about it. Now, they misdate it. One of the most popular ones has over 1 million views. It's 1177 BC. He's real close, but there's a reason why he's 30-something years off. But it's no big deal. That's minor. It's still the same thing, a 300-year dark age, and then the Greek world was born. Then the Roman world, the Persian world, then the Macedonian world, the Ptolemaic dynasties. And then the world woke up after that, and we know that as classical civilization. That's the classical world. So the classical world survived 13 centuries after that dark age was over. Everything was fine. And then the Europeans started coming and rebelling against Rome. And Odovacar got 10 European countries together, and they kicked Rome's ass in 476 AD. And Rome fell in its 1229th year. This was right before the epic Phoenix phenomenon disaster of the year 522, the great 40-year Justinian darkness. Again, we have this major rewriting of history to cover up this fact that the world went dark for almost 40 years. Plagues, world population decimation, starvation on a massive level, wars, whole populations just literally vanish. They cease to exist. I even gave a shout out to my lunch break recently for coming to the same conclusion using nothing but U.S. Bureau of Justice statistics, population statistics, and then going backwards and using a simple arithmetic, figured out that the 6th century AD human population was almost at zero. He's absolutely correct, but for totally different reasons. The Phoenix phenomenon also shows human population was reduced to almost nothing. But here's two major things that came out of that period. One, the church authority now took preeminence over the individual states, which were crippled because people were searching for God. People were searching for something that had meaning, and the Roman papacy took advantage of that. Even the knights, the nobility, equestrian class, even the kings and queens, the courts, even they looked toward Rome for some type of guidance. This is called the Dark Ages. Yeah. Literacy plummeted, and it was at this time Europeans were not equipped to deal with total systemic collapse. But Bedouin Arabs have been dealing with it for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. They were already comfortable with a lifestyle that was nomadic. They took their houses with them on camelbacks, and they went everywhere, and it took two or 3 hours to set up a whole town. And everywhere the Bedouins went, in 2 or 3 hours, when the Bedouin leaders would drop their staffs, all the engineers would get out with the right camels, go find, and all the families all had a camel in tow that provided infrastructure. And within 4 or 5 hours, before the sun even went down in the desert, a new town could pop up. And this is how they've been doing it since the days of Abraham or before. So all these towns would pop up. So this is what happened.
It's really interesting, actually. His Prophet Muhammad was born in 570. So that's
what I'm going to tell you. This is when it happened. At the very beginning of the new Dark Age, Europeans gave up. They lost their infrastructure. They lost all the amenities, everything, and they're killing each other. They're eating each other. It's just terrible. It's terrible. Yeah. Now, the Middle East went through reset easier than anybody else. There's not much to destroy. Their way of life is totally different. Now, starving Europeans, starving Jewish mariners and traders, what do they bring? They bring the most valuable things they can for food, lodging, animals, provisions, and silver. This is what the gold was so rare, it was almost never even used in the ancient world. Most people don't know that. Gold was extremely rare. But silver wasn't, and neither was copper and bronze. And they came and they brought their books. And it was the pre-Islamic Arabic Bedouins, the Saracens. These are the ones that started collecting all these books. And most people don't know that the Western world owes a debt to the Arabian, basically the Arabic people. They owe a debt because it was the Arabic people that preserved all the Greek and Roman Latin manuscripts. They kept them even though they couldn't even read them. And then 3 centuries later, Arab scholarship flourished in the days of al-Makrizi, in the days of al-Masadi, in the days of al-Biruni. I've read all of them. I have all of them.
I love al-Biruni. He's one of my favorites.
He traveled the world. Now these were the intellectual elite of 1,000 years ago. Yeah. This was then. Moses Maimonides. Now Moses Maimonides is a little bit. He's a little different. He's Jewish and practicing Islam. But so we have these men that were 900 Rashi. We have these men that were 900 years ago to 11 centuries ago, and they are the result of the knowledge transfer from Europeans to the Middle East. The book transfer was because no one had anything of value but scrolls and books. So they sold them to the Bedouins and the Arabs and all the traders and the mariners because they had all the wealth and the money. They literally didn't even stop their life during the whole Dark Age, during the whole reset. Their life stayed the same in the desert. It didn't even change. So it was during this period of transit for the whole world's destroyed, that these Arabian people took all this information. Well, let me tell you what else they took. They also took in a vast population of Jews who could no longer live among the Europeans. They took them in too. What do the Jews bring? They bring all these Christian records with them and all these Judaic records with them. And if you believe that the Quran is actually a Jewish composition to control a people, I'm going to tell you you're correct. I'm going to tell you you're right.
Yeah, and I think
it was done with the aid of Arabian people who wanted to exercise that control.
And what's really also very interesting, and I think it must be noted, and this is actually what you've just told me is actually kind of sort of thrown a spanner in the works of what I discovered, but actually makes sense now, because what you're saying actually is like, okay, that's probably what actually happened. But when you go into the history of the sort of geopolitical landscape of that time, sort of just before Prophet Muhammad was born and up to when he was born, and then later on as well, you find that the north of the peninsula, of the Arabian Peninsula, was heavily influenced by the Byzantine, right? Yeah. So by the Christians, and the southern parts and the west and the Hijaz side of it, which was the western lower parts, and some, so pretty much the Hijaz, which is on the left coast, that all was very much influenced by the Syrians, right? So the Syrian Empire, because those were the two big empires at that time, right? And what you find is that, as you said, the majority of people that lived there with the Arab pagans, as we call them, were the Christians and the Jews. Now, the Jews and the Christians of that region had been there for, according to history, they had been there for a while, okay? Meaning that they were so far from their sort of the centers of their control, so meaning Rome or wherever, Byzantine or Jerusalem or wherever it even was. And then also with Syria, they were so far away in that sort of peninsula. And as you said, their lifestyle was so nomadic and different that the Jews and the Christians of that time had kind of that whole culture had kind of fused and blended into one culture. And a lot of, when you go into the historic sort of record, what you find is that, well, they're going to say it's Mecca because obviously it's all distorted. So let's just use Mecca as an example. But we know that it could potentially have been Petra, right? But what they're saying is that in that region, there was all these, the worshipping that was going on wasn't actually how we are told as Muslims, so that they were idols and they were idol worshippers, which gives you this impression that it was very Hindu-esque, right? So it was like that kind of idol, but it wasn't. This is what I discovered. It actually wasn't. It was they believed in Allah. That was the name of their God. That he was the head of the gods. And as you, I think, I don't know if it was you or who it was, I recently heard they mentioned that it's in the Quran. They've mentioned 3 deities that they actually did worship with. Uzza was one of them, Uzza, Alat, which was the daughter of
that's right,
Allah. And Lat, Uzza, and Mannat. That's the other one, right? So these three are actually mentioned in the Quran. So when I was doing my studies, I actually went and researched them, and it was very, very fascinating. But coming back to what the point I was making was that at that time, the Arabian people, their religion was basically, they believed in Abraham and all those stories, and they believed in the Abrahamic faith. So what it looked like is that they were remnants of the Abrahamic faith, but it had kind of become very, very ritualized and very, very almost paganized, you can call it, by having these sort of like, they even had apparently inside the Kaaba, which is the inside of the actual Mecca, inside the temple, they had a huge statue of Abraham in there, and he was very much dressed like in a very shamanic way, which is quite interesting. So he was depicted as a shaman, which is also very interesting to me because I'm kind of, quite into that shamanistic side. But they weren't sitting there and worshipping idols in the way that we kind of can perceive or is told in the mainstream. They were heavily influenced by Jews. They were heavily influenced by Christianity. They had a depiction of the Virgin Mary and the baby. They had all of these different idols inside that Kaaba, according to history. And what had started happening is within their own sort of little peninsula and their own culture, they started to, before even Prophet Muhammad was born, and around that time, was something called Hanifism. I don't know if you've come across this.
No, I haven't.
Hanifism, which is Hanifism, right? Hanif. Because in the Quran, God called Abraham a Hanif, and a Hanif is a person, is just the word means to take the right way, the righteous, or being on the right path, right? Now, this ideology had existed since, obviously, as I explained, that from history, it says that they were very, very influenced, like you said, by the Jews, right? And the Christians of that time and their stories and their narratives. So they kind of were almost like Christians and Jews anyway, but they were just a very away from the main sort of religions, because even the Jews and the Christians at that time had kind of like come away from their original traditions and sort of turned into this sort of other sort of paganish type of thing. And they were really into, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Kahins, but the Kahins were a group of people who were like bards or mystics, you can call them. We can have some kind of shamanistic thing, and they would, give you prophecies, and they would give you all these sort of things. So all of that sort of was what was going on there. And then suddenly you see this guy, and he wasn't Muhammad. It was a guy called Zayed bin, I'll get the name and I will send it to you, but I can't remember his full name off the top of my head, but he was called Zayd bin something. He was known at that time as someone who would stand outside the Kaaba, the temple at Mecca, and he would call out to people. And, he was a rebel. He would say, like, what are you guys doing? You are walking away from the religion of Abraham. You are not being monotheists. And, so he was very much on that tip.
You do know that bin is a Hebrew word, right?
Which one?
The name you just said, Ben, means the son of.
Son of, yeah. Then that was what they used to say.
In Hebrew, yeah. So absolutely. I'm just gonna throw this out there. It's something you may want to look into, but I'm about to give you a rabbit hole.
Cool.
And
love those.
Yeah, it's one we have not discussed yet, but I'm about to give you a rabbit hole, and I'm going to challenge you to disprove it.
Okay, cool.
All right. I'm gonna give you an assignment. I'm gonna tell you now. We're gonna do it. Hey, I love having you on my channel. This is an amazing conversation. We're nowhere near done. But we have several PDFs you sent me that we haven't even got to yet, and we can get to them in other videos. We're in no hurry. This can be a whole series. I'm cool with that. But I have an assignment for you.
Sure.
And we can do a video for it. I'm gonna tell you a series of facts, and I'm gonna claim they're facts, and I want you to do all research you got to do to see if you can disprove this.
Okay.
Are you ready for this series of facts?
Do it. Do it for your country.
Okay. All right. When the Moors and the Saracens first invaded Europe, when they did it, chronologically, it was after 622 AD. Chronologically, it was after the supposed beginning of Islam. Chronologically, it was supposed to be after Muhammad had had his whole career in ministry and life. When France and Spain were invaded from North Africa by the Moors and the Saracens, Arabs. The Arabian invasion of southern Europe was later repelled by Charles Martel, the hammer. Mm-hmm. This is all historical. This is all known historical facts. Now, what's interesting is this led to the collapse of the Moravian dynasty, the original Frankish dynasty. So this is what put a high dense population of Arabian people in Spain, in the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile, in southern France. Northern France was always Viking. It was Normans. You know what I mean? Southern France, the French people over centuries, they got darker hair, darker eyes. They adopted a lot because there was a lot of intermarrying. So what I'm telling you is the invasions were Arabic. There's nothing in the historical record you're going to find that says anything about Islam invaded in the 6th century, in 7th century, and 8th century. There's no references in the history books to Islam invading anybody, to Mohammedan armies. No, that's Arabic. It's Arabic with auxiliaries of Black African Moors at the time that were basically conscripted by Arab sub-Saharan. They were going all throughout Africa and turning different areas into Arabian provinces. Mm-hmm. This is before the spread of Islam. Mm-hmm. So this is what we're told. We're told Islam invaded all and did all this. But I'm looking for anybody to show me historical records on that. Now, the second series of facts. Here's the second series of facts. Mm-hmm. Is 300 years later. 300 years later, all of a sudden, Islam is the demon of the Middle East from the Christian perspective. All of a sudden, the church and state unify in order to do land grabs throughout Europe, and they bankrupted whole feudal areas so they could pay for their own weapons, weaponsmithies, armor, armored wagons, their retainers, provisions. And these guys thought it was a privilege to be knighted by the crown. Then they literally mortgaged their entire estates to pay for their armor, their destriers, their war horses, their retainers, their pages, their squires, and then all these European men marched to Jerusalem to go liberate it from the evil Islam. But this is the first time in the historical record that there's a conflict between Islam and Christianity. It's called the Crusades. And the war is over Jerusalem, which doesn't belong to Christianity or Islam. It belongs to the Jews. So this is all I want you to do is.
Well, I can already tell you a snapshot of it. But I can already give you a quick snapshot of the fact that I've not come across it, right? So I have not come across in Islamic history them talking about that specific invasion. There are other ones, the ones that were going into Jerusalem and Syria and all those different places.
That was during the Crusades. That was the 10th century, the 12th century, 13th century, all that. The invasions I'm talking about,
what happened before that?
Was after Islam was already fully established, 7th and 8th century AD, but there's no references to Muhammad or Islam in these invasions and the accounts of these invasions. It was just Saudi Arabian. It was just Arabian, Bedouin, and African.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting that you say that, because a lot of things that are sort of attributed that Prophet Muhammad was doing this or the Mohammedan way, what I found in my sort of research is that didn't really exist, and it just wasn't there. There wasn't any information around that, and that information, like you said, suddenly just emerged. So it's like, well, who sat there and concocted this and then just decided that actually this is going to favor us from a political standpoint, and this is how we gain control? But my personal opinion is that all of this stuff that's happening, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and to a certain extent, even Hinduism, you know, like there's a lot of distortion in Hinduism, and you go into their sort of Vedas and stuff as well. Like not necessarily the Vedas, but definitely like the Bhagavad Gita corrects that. But all of these, I think, are created by those same people, the ones who have all the knowledge, these who we today call elites. They have all that knowledge, and they utilize that knowledge to create these different narratives. And we've seen that throughout history. And I personally have come to the conclusion that that is what's happened with what we see today as Islam, right? But what's really important for an errant, I guess, or someone who is like, you know, like people in our community, is that that body of texts, which we call the Quran, is actually very good knowledge in there. And what it makes me realize is that if there was a Prophet Muhammad, if there was a guy called Muhammad, and if he was the guy who was getting these revelations, and he was someone who went on all these journeys and then came back to Arabia and thought, well, bloody hell, you guys are so ignorant, and, you know, got really pissed off and depressed about it, that the state of affairs is not good, because he's sitting in circles as a merchant where he's going to places like Egypt, he's going to places like Syria, where all that information, you know, the libraries are and all that, like you said, all that information is. And I'm sure he's having these sort of intellectual conversations, because if these are the things that are in their, you know, in his mind, clearly, because it's something that it shows in history that throughout his childhood, he was one of those people that did sort of question, you know, like, what is this or what's that? So if he's that kind of character and that's how you're depicting it, then for me, I'm that kind of character. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've gone and done my research and I found things out. So for me, it looks like somebody who's gone through a journey, the immortal soul journey, or the prodigal son, or whatever you want to call it, gone through a journey, he's come back round. And the story of how he started even getting the revelations are that he would go up to the mountain and he would meditate. So he wasn't doing like the 5 times prayers that we see. He was meditating. Right. So he's influenced by Buddhism. He's being influenced by, you know, if you look at the Muslim prayer today, we could even say it's very much like yoga. So what I'm saying is that there's this guy who's come out of this nomadic, you know, Arabian Peninsula, which is a little bit backward. They're all really steeped into their traditions and their rituals. And now he's gone out. So his mind has expanded, and now he's come back. And I know from my experience that when I started to really look for the truth, and this is something you've said before, I would get into these zones, and the information, I felt literally like it's just being pulled out of somewhere and it's just getting downloaded into me, and I'm making those connections. So I'm just a normal person. So then why is this guy who's sitting on a mountain, who's had all these experiences and meditate, how come, you know, what's to say he's not getting those same sort of mystical type experiences and downloads from the field that we say? And when he did, according to the mainstream story, he was really bloody depressed about it. Like he got really down about it, and to the point where he went to his wife and he was like, I think I'm going mad, love. You know, it's in his story. So this is the mainstream Muslim story of his. So that made me think, and I thought, hang on, so he's gone through trauma, he's gone around the world, he's woken the hell up, he's come back home. Sounds like an errant to me. And now he's like, okay, this is all wrong. And now he's telling people, okay.
No, I'm putting that up because somebody's totally misquoting me. I've read the Ibn Fadlan manuscript. I already know about the Muslims that traveled with the Vikings and all that. This person here got triggered. They don't understand what I was saying to you, Affy, is that we have historical records of Arabians invading southern Europe in the 6th, 7th century AD. We have no historical records of Muslims doing it. There is a distinction. Exactly. Muslim is an Arabian who's adopted the Mohammedan culture, a Mohammedan religion. We don't have references to Mohammedism until centuries later. That's my problem. Just like Christianity, a religion has been created ex post facto. It has been written by people hundreds of years after the events they depict. But what they didn't do is go get the scrolls and the books off the shelves that were existing in the 6th and 7th century and rewrite those so they could complete the lie. They probably didn't think older books would ever be found. This is what I do in Archaix. I'm always going to the source text that existed at the time. Give an example. A prime example. Before we continue,
of course,
everybody tell him. Everybody's always asking me, Jason, what do you think about the Great Black Death? What do you think about the 14th century when 1/3 of the world's population died? What do you think the type of disease was when those rats came from China in the east and infected Europe and everybody died? And I'm like, where do you get this information? prior to the Encyclopedia Americana 1950s, that version of events never even existed. Where are you getting this? Because the books that were written in the 15th century to describe what happened in the 14th century don't mention rats from ships. They don't mention plague coming from the east. They say the plague started in the east, but the reason it ended up in Europe and in northern Africa in the Mediterranean is because cigar-shaped objects appeared in the sky and their bellies opened and they dropped decomposing, fetid, terrible smelling forest animals that have been through a blender and just were putrid, and they literally dumped them all over the forest. This is what the historical record says. This is what I have a video about this called the Great Black Death, 1347 AD. Most people don't know this. The historians of the day are describing machine-like objects just carrying out a function, going over forests deep in Europe, far away from ports and oceans, and just dumping body parts out. And the Great Black Death Plague killed a third of the human race after that. Had nothing to do with rats coming off of ships. That was a theory historians had come up with. What's up?
And let me just add to that what you said, because there is actually verses in the Quran which I've separated that are to do with the sky and things about the sky. And one of the things that it does talk about is how the plague, it says it twice. There's two verses that I can sort of remember on the top of my head where I've read, where it says the plague, we sent it from the sky. It also says that there are vaults in the sky. And I know that you've spoken about how you think that the sky is not what we deem it to be, right? There's things hidden within the sky that we can't see. So like, for example, there's weaponry there's sort of certain gates that open, like you said, there's also putrid fresh flesh coming out that, we've got records of that kind of stuff. So the Quran does corroborate what you're saying by saying the plagues were sent from the skies. That's quite interesting, right?
That is interesting. I mean, in the Quran, it's always angelic beings talking among themselves, explaining why they did what they did. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Quran is an angel explaining what we did, why we destroyed these cities, why we ended the civilization of the Ad and the Thamud. I remember this. I remember reading the Quran and reading these narratives like, wow, who's this angel talking to? Dude, this is an angel talking. Who is he talking to? Well, did the I remember seeing those things like, wow, man, it's crazy.
What's really crazy when you mentioned the Ad and the Thamud, and obviously you've uncovered the history of the Adamu, right? The Adamu were a tribe, or were known as the humans. And what's really interesting is that Thamud, the Talmud, from what I've found out, was the successors of the Ad, right? So the Ad came before. And just looking at the etymology, like Ad, Adon, Adamu. Yeah. So I'm like, so they were the first people that according to the Quran is saying that these are the ancients. So this is even before Abraham. This is before all these guys. And then came the Talmud, who were the successors of the Ad. So the Adamu, they had that reset and they're gone. Now the next lot come. Now what's interesting about Talmudic is that you actually have references of the word Talmud used in Sargon II. I think you've talked a lot about Sargon II, right? And in that sort of period. So that's quite interesting, because it kind of gives you some kind of chronological marker of, well, when could this civilization have been? So what I find really interesting with your stuff is, because obviously I read all this in the Quran, I'm like, ooh, who were they? Oh, I think they were, so I can make those connections now because you've kind of brought all that information to light. So that's really interesting. And then also I found that the word Thamud went all the way up to, it was ancient, but it went all the way up to that sort of throughout that sort of history. So what it seemed like was it was a name of that meant ancients. That's what I found out. So I found that in certain scholars have gone and looked at that word and where it's been found, and the word Thamud has been used frequently throughout the centuries about this group of people. And there's some scholars who say that the word probably just means ancients. So that's quite interesting.
That would be similar. That was similar to the Navajo when they were describing their predecessors who built stone structures that they didn't claim. They just called them the Anasazi, which was ancient ones. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's lots of sort of different angles to it. But yes, it does talk about Talmud and Ad a lot, and the Quran is very much like, so there's obviously the esoteric side, so all the bits that you see that they're saying you should have 4 wives, or this is what you need to do with your will, or all this socio sort of political sort of structure that you see in the Islamic world that they claim is the Islamic way, and or Sharia or whatever you want to call it. Those words are grossly distorted as far as I'm concerned, because, for example, there's a chapter in the Quran called Nisa, which means women, right? And it doesn't mean women, because when you go and look at the root word, it means desires, which makes sense because it's talking about the inner universe within us, right? So that's the sort of the esoteric side of it. Then you've got the sort of historical narratives, which are also very interesting because they're layered, because you've got the history, which has been corrected. So they've called out clearly in the Quran that the Trinity is a lie, basically, this whole concept of Jesus and the whole sort of crucifixion narrative. It's saying it's a lie, and it always refers to Jesus as son of Maryam, who is Mary.
Right.
It never there's no sort of like, and it says very clearly that he was the son of Mary, and this story was concocted. It says that. So that's the other part that you'll find in there.
You got to stop right there. Hold on. Where's my?
Yeah,
check
259. Thank you to Planetary Intelligence.
Yeah, I was just going. I'll what's that? Al-Baqarah? Is that that's not a part of the Quran?
Yeah, it is. It's chapter 2.
Is it? Okay.
I can
read it. Mine's not separated, so I don't have any titles like this in mine. Mine don't have any separations. I don't know when they added the surahs to the Quran, but my copy doesn't have them. So, let's see.
But yeah, I can read that out to you, but it does. I mean, I've got it written
down.
No,
that's good. That's good. I want to comment on what you just said about the Christianity. The story was concocted. Okay. Well, one, playing devil's advocate, I can say, well, the Quran is BS, because that statement was written over 500 years after the events that it depicts. So saying it didn't happen can I can say, just a man wrote that. But then I can play devil's advocate further, and like the student of Alexander of Macedon, Callisthenes, he was known for his ability to expertly argue both sides of an argument, and then his class would have to figure out which one was the truth. So I'm going to employ that. I'm going to employ that method right now. I'm going to argue for. I'm going to agree with you that
because it's actually
original Christianity. Well, check it out. Original Christianity was identical. It is exactly identical to original Mohammedanism.
Yeah.
Islam seems to be the product of about a 200-year development.
I agree.
And that at the end of that 200 years, a fully developed system now implied that it was fully developed from the beginning when it was not. This is what the church councils did. The church councils literally took a story, and it became so bloody because the original Christian population never believed in a physical Jesus. The original Christian population was about 19 different denominations, and they were all students of the Gnosis. Under the Gnostic principles, everything of true spiritual essence is merely metaphor, symbolism, parable. Nothing happened in the physical world that could ever affect the spiritual. In the Gnostic principle, the story of the gospel was beautiful. The story of the passion, but it was just that, a spiritual story, a Greek stage play. And it was the carnalization of the story into something physical that the Roman Church began doing. And in order to do that, they literally had to butcher man, woman, and child of the Gnostics. They literally killed the Gnostics in order to bring their doctrine to the forefront. And it still took over 1,000 years. Do you know the European history of the Waldenses and the Cathars in southern France?
A little bit.
These people were Gnostic holdouts, and their people had been Christians for over 1,000 years. And in their text and in their teachings, Christ was a concept, and they were a very holy people. But finally, after a church council, 100% made Jesus a part, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. He's a part of the Trinity, and Mary and Mary. Man, when they did that, they sent the papal armies into southern France, and they killed every man, woman, and child. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people, and the Cathars and the Waldenses died simply because they knew the truth that Jesus was never a physical man. And they eliminated all.
And it's so true, right? Because even in the Quranic text, it actually talks about that sect of Christianity that are so pious and they are on the right path. It actually calls them out. So it separates the liars from within Christianity from the Gnostics, for example.
This was the difference between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Western Church. Initially, the Eastern Orthodox Church didn't have a physical Jesus. Christ was a concept all the way up to the beginning of the Dark Ages, the 6th and 7th century. In the Byzantine Church, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, Jesus was Lord of the mushroom. He wasn't even a physical. He wasn't even a real person in history. He was carnalized later by the influence of Rome.
And that makes so much sense, right? Because what you're just saying, it makes so much sense because the Christians of the Arabian Peninsula who'd been there for however long, right? They've obviously so far removed from the people, that are being influenced in those main sort of cities that they were kind of holding on to the older sort of beliefs of Christianity as well, I feel. And I do think that they had that similar sort of concept as the Gnostics about Jesus as well. I mean, that could be true, it could not be true, because they did have idols of Jesus and Mary and all that. But what's really interesting is this verse in the Quran, which is An-Nisa, which is the chapter which is supposed to be desires, but it's obviously called women, which is chapter 4, verse 157, when they bring this topic up. And it says, I'm just giving you the English translation, and they boast, behold, we have slain the Christ Jesus, son of Mary, an apostle of God. However, they did not slay him, and neither did they crucify him, but it only seemed to them so. And verily, those who hold conflicting views thereon are indeed confused, having no real knowledge thereof, and follow mere conjecture. For a certainty, they did not slay him. So it's almost like what you're saying, right? So it's a story that was concocted. But I mean, you're saying that there might have been, one of these Gnostic people where they grabbed them and they did crucify someone, because they used to crucify people all the time. But all I'm saying is that for my personal journey, and I'm not saying whether it's right or not, all the things you've uncovered about first, the Judaic stuff being created out of much previous texts, then similarly, the fact that Jesus was supposed to be a mystical character, wasn't a real person. I
put these up here to answer because there's like 4 or 5 people asking about that. Guys, my research is published on Twitter, and my moderators are always putting my X link in the file. I literally have thousands and thousands of posts on Twitter. All of them are short. They show pictures. Look, I have a whole post and thread that explains to you and shows you actual pictures of Jesus, Lord of the Mushroom, and old Byzantine churches and all that. This isn't something I made up. This is a very old concept. So, I think it's a really good idea that, if we could do a few more videos, because some of the things that, I wanted to sort of bring up, like some of the important terminologies in the Quran, like things like the word Rasul, which they believe is, the prophet was a prophet. That means prophet, basically, in the mainstream. Right. Al-Kitab, which means the book, which is mentioned again and again and again and again. And this is sort of going to go more into your sort of simulation theories and all those kind of things. And it's talking about the scripts. And I know you always talk about the 2 scripts that are running, right? This is something you've come up with. But if you go into the Quran away from the mainstream and you look at the actual word, Al-Kitab means script. That's what it means. It doesn't mean a book, it means script. And what it's telling you is that the Al-Kitab is within you. So you have a personal script, so for your individualized journey that you're here to have. And then there's a collective script, which is obviously showcased by the narrative of the historic events. So it does corroborate that side too. And there's a whole probably video in there where we could actually go into, this is Allah, what does it mean? What's the actual root word? We can actually really go that far if you wanted to, because it's so important, because this information is
knowledge that I think we need to have. And it's so sad to me that how it has been so demonized, right? Because of the actions that you see on the mainstream, but a lot of it is also distortion from the oppositions, right? So you've got the Christians with their narrative. There's a great historian, I think he's an American guy actually, and my mum used to watch him all the time, and he started making a joke about it that, you know, that's your new boyfriend, because every time you'd go in her room, she'd have him on YouTube. His name is Roy Casagranda, and I really recommend a lot of people who want to know about Islamic history, like the mainstream, the written record. He does a really good job of it. Like, I think he's someone who's very fair, but he's really, like you, very on point in terms of how he describes what happened. Albeit he's probably not uncovered the kind of hidden sort of secrets that you have, but he's sort of just telling you how it is. And I think it's a really, he's a good resource that I've sort of used in the past as well, just to understand that whole, what was going on. Because, you know, Christians say, well, they burnt all the libraries. Well, there's, you know, evidence against that, saying that actually the Muslims were the ones that were preserving it. It was the Crusaders that were going and burning everything. I'm not saying that Muslims didn't ever do that. I'm not here to, you know, I don't take sides. I'm like you. I'm just completely impartial.
Well, you're on point, because I'm going to tell you now. One of the greatest scholars of all times, mathematician and geographer, was Hypatia. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't Muslims that flayed her alive with oyster shells. It was Christians. It's because they didn't like what she was saying. But she was a female scholar named Hypatia, and they did her in either Byzantium or pre-Constantinople. You know what? It was in Alexandria, and it was in Egypt at the library. But the Christians are responsible for the destruction of many libraries. But before Christianity, it was the Romans. The Romans did away in the year 1, Anno Domini, our calendar right now. In the year 1, the Roman Senate ordered the burning of over 2,000 volumes of the Greek prophecies.
Exactly.
Before that, the Pergamum library was destroyed. Destruction of libraries is a thing that it just happens.
And another connection that's about that is also like the Sufism aspect, right? Because if you think about Sufism, the word Sufi, very similar to Sophia, right? So they have roots in Hermeticism. That's where Sufism comes from, because this group of people already existed and were known, openly called out in the Arabian Peninsula. There used to be a group of people who were very much into the Hermetic and philosophies and the sort of Gnostic philosophies that you see, you know, like the ones you see in Nag Hammadi, the real sort of knowledge. And then these guys used those texts, like you said, and obviously now you've explained that how after the Cataclysm, Europeans sold them a lot of the knowledge too. So that's even added more meat to that. But there seems to be in the, you know, if you go start researching into the background, pre-Islamic, these people, the Sufis, existed from the beginning of time, it seems. You know, these are the Sophia people, the people who believe in the Gnostic sort of beliefs. So there's that aspect of Islam, which is, I think I connect more with now. And now I sort of feel like I mean, I don't have any label, but it's one of the group of people that I think, I'd like to understand more of what your thoughts are, because actually it's more aligned with what I do. But in terms of the mainstream that you see today, it is absolutely created to make a political narrative. That's how I see it. You know, the whole explosion of Islam, it's absolutely calculated. I'm sorry, it just really is, because it is not at all how I think things really happened or who was behind it all. There's lots of, I mean, there's so many little bits that I haven't even mentioned, right? Because we don't have the time to, but the gist of the story is that the religion that we today see in the mainstream as Islam is not the message of the book Quran. It's just not. Because any layman can get up and pick up the Quran and start looking at the actual, you know, words and start, if you've got that sort of mind, you pretty much start seeing this is knowledge about the internal self. It's telling you what is desires. It's telling you the kind of things that happen, like Ramadan. I mean, that's one of the topics that I wanted to search because, you know, as growing up as a kid, we were like told you have to fast now, and no one wanted to. And I remember, because I'm quite earnest just as a person, like if I'm doing something, I'm going to do it properly. And I really thought I was doing it to please God. So I was sitting there starving myself, or my cousin was just stuffing her face and then pretending she's fasting. So I'd get really pissed off with it. So that was one of the topics that I did research. And the word Ramd actually means heat, intense heat. And what that passage is, and it's only been mentioned once in the whole Quran, the word Ramadan, it's only been mentioned once. And it is one of the key 5 pillars of this, of the faith that we see called Islam today, right? But what is that verse telling us? It's absolutely esoteric knowledge about the inner self. It is telling you about the intense heat that comes through you, the passion that comes through you when an idea comes. And it's telling you the source, or let's say it's God, right? It's telling you that actually when you feel that intensity of emotions within you, that rumd, that heat, that intense heat, then you must abstain. And that word abstinence, sayam, it means abstinence. It doesn't mean abstinence of food, because everything is metaphorical. So it's talking about food for thought. Do you see what I mean? So it's saying that put your thoughts, so, close your mind and empty your mind and actually use it, and then give yourself that break. And then you can go back to that idea, because that intensity and that sort of like, I need to do this now sort of thing is not in your best interest. So it's all like advices like that to somebody who wants to understand their inner self and their inner universe and how it works. And then obviously there's layers to that. So as above, so below. And you can really see when you get to that stage of understanding in the Quran, the whole concept of the base rule is as above, so below, as within, so without, as the soul, so the universe. That is the gist of the Quran. That is what it's telling you. It's telling you exactly the same thing that all these other ancient, superpowered texts have come through. It's not telling you anything different. So this tragedy that's happened, where it's been completely distorted and turned into this hellish sort of looking thing, it's a travesty, really, to me. But it's been a real source of comfort for me, because now that I've come to that understanding, I can actually go to Quran. Has been something that I go to. I actually use it to help me in my day-to-day life, because I'm like, I'm feeling this way. What does that mean? And it's the same with the Bhagavad Gita. If you go into that, it talks about the modes of reality. It talks
I love the story of Arjuna. The whole Bhagavad Gita is awesome. Yeah.
I love it too. And I have to tell you guys how I came across the Bhagavad Gita. This is part of these mystical things, like, the field is sort of almost giving to you. So I'm going on the London Underground. I don't know if you guys know about the tube system in London. This is when I used to work in the city. So I've worked for 20 years in the corporate world, right? So that's my background. And I was with my friend who's also in the corporate world. We jumped on the tube and we sat there, and for days, and this has been a theme for me in my life of how knowledge comes to me. Everyone has a different thing. But for me, I think I might be clairaudient or whatever they call, because I hear actual words get told to me. So I'm like, for days, I was like, Bhagavad Gita in my brain. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I thought, okay, that's cool. I should read that. And I started thinking about it a lot. And I get onto the tube and I'm sitting there with my friend. We're just talking. And this guy comes and he sits down and he picks up something that was on the seat. He picks it up and it's a book, and he starts reading it. And it's the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm telling my friend, stop yawning, Jason. You're like yawning at me. I'm telling my friend that this is
I'm fascinated by this. I am, but I'm tired for totally different reasons.
My friends did say, don't put him to sleep, Affy. Don't start ranting, because I'm like you, I'm a ranter. But the point I'm making is, it came to me. I was given that book by the guy, because he said, look, it's somebody's, I just found it on the seat. You can have it. And I was just given it. So this is another example of how knowledge just comes to us when, we're in that field where
it's in the field. Affy, it's in the field. And I got to comment on something, because I don't like to break you up, because you get on a roll. I just back off. Listen, the two narratives all throughout that are woven through life, these two separate realities that we're coexisting in at the same time, that we're a part of this. You can call it a bicameral existence, but listen, the Old Testament is the exact same way. The book of Genesis has 2 creation stories. It has 2 destruction stories. There are 2 different versions of the flood in the book of Genesis. There's 2 different versions of the creation event, an Adam and Eve event in the book of Genesis. Starting with the book of Exodus, there is entirely 2 separate narratives about how the events unfolded in the Old Testament. There are 2 different stories of David doing the census. One of them says, and that the reason David was punished was because he chose to number the sons of Israel in a census before he went to war, which shows God a lack of faith. Why are you numbering all them? Why do you think that the numbers of the heads of Israel is what's going to decide this battle? So he was told not to do it. He would get in trouble, but he did. He did a census, found out how many he had, and the text literally says that he was influenced to do this by Yahweh. This is what it says. It says that Yahweh influenced David to do this. Therefore, it was Yahweh influenced David to punish him, to suffer punishment. But there's a different version in a whole different book of the Old Testament that gives you David's life. David's life is in two different books of the Bible, two different versions. The other version specifically says, and Satan influenced David to do this so he would get punished. Over and over and over and over, we see the exact same stories in the Old Testament. One of them is Satan. One of them is Yahweh. I'm telling you, they're both telling the truth. But I'm telling you, they're telling the truth. Yeah, that thing that jumped out that burning bush for Moses, gave him the law. Yeah, that was Yahweh. And speaking out of that burning bush was also Satan. The Bible's not lying. This is the story in the Bible. It doesn't tell you directly. It tells you in two different narratives, and you've got to put it together yourself. It's the Old Testament says there's only one tabernacle, and then it describes that tabernacle. And it's the tabernacle of Moses. They put the Ark of the Covenant in there. And then Hosea is mad at the Israelites because they're listening to Moses, and he tells them, why are you going to that tabernacle built by Molech, a demon? Over and over and over and over, we see
parallels.
The truth is being revealed, but it's being revealed in two entirely separate narratives. These narratives are from the perspective of the sons of Leviathan, the Levites. The other one are the Aaronites. These are the Israelite priesthood. Remember, the contention in the Old Testament was between the Judahites and the Israelites. They never got along. Never got along. And they ended up parting ways almost forever. That contention between them still exists today in their descendants. But I just wanted to mention that because these two narratives you find in the Quran, the two narratives you find in reality, those two narratives are right there in the Bible too. Through the entire thread of the Old Testament, almost every single story is told twice from two different perspectives.
That's so interesting, isn't it? But I mean, there's so many sort of different angles you can go at with the whole Quranic text, right? Because it's because I've actually looked into the text that I can say these things, right? So there's a lot of people, especially in mainstream Islam, that they've just they don't know what's in the Quran. I have so many people that I talk to in my journey, because obviously, because I'm not a public person, I'm not coming out there and telling people about this. So it's mostly, in my own circles. And I had, my own dad called me a Hindu, and he was telling my kids, he's like, your mother's turned into a Hindu. And I'm like, oh, I can't deal with this. But yeah, you can't have these conversations. I can't have these conversations with my own community. I can't. Or what I would like to call my own community. I can't have those conversations anymore at all, because they are so, like you say about in the Christian world and in the Judaic world, people are just so steeped with cognitive dissonance and this dungeon programming and the Quran calls out cognitive dissonance. It calls out dungeon programming. So there's a lot of that kind of information, like you said, in the Bible, where it gives us truths as well, but then it's also giving us like another side of it, right? But yeah, my journey has very much been that what we see in the mainstream is not what it actually is in the Quranic text. It's just not.
It's amazing. My own dad won't even ask me questions anymore. My community has seen my dad in videos. They've seen him at all the meetups, and he's in the comment section every once in a while. He's probably listening to this right now. But yeah, he tells me, he says, shit, I'm not ask you anything. Anytime I ask you something, you totally upend something I've believed all my life.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like we're just sort of out there sort of destroying these people's like whole mindsets. But the whole game is the mental bondage. The slavery is from the mind. And, the concept in Islam of idol worshipping, is not actually a real idol. It's about the idols that we build in our mind, right? Because we create these belief systems, and our belief systems drive the values that we then have, and those values then drive what we're actually going to do, right? So what are we actually going to do with our actions? So that's what it all comes down to. It's not about, there's no real there's history there, but you can uncover that history, because it could be a parable, because it's actually trying to teach you something. It's telling you that cataclysms happen. It's telling you, go and look at the written record, go and do your studies, go and look at the narrative, and you will find that they are systematic resets, and civilizations get reset. So you guys need to take heed of that. That's kind of the gist of the narrative, right? So you've got all that Phoenix phenomena stuff. You've got all of the sort of bits and bobs about the dark, the sort of skies going red, and all of those descriptions. You find them in the Quran, same way you find them in Revelations. Then you obviously go into they talk about the hour, which is the end days, right? So the hour. And this is really interesting, because time and the importance of timekeeping is another topic in the Quran which keeps coming up. It keeps talking about how important it is. It talks about how the sky was designed in a way that we could keep time, which is interesting, right? Because if you go to it talks about how the sky has been created with constellations. It talks about how it's been done for a reason, and that reason is so you can keep the time and know when the next thing is coming. So you see what I mean? So this is why it's so important, calendrics and the work that you do, chronology, when you came about, and I saw that, and I straight away resonated, because I said, no one's really sat there and done this kind of work, because it's in the chronology that they've messed us all up, right? They've just distorted everything around. But the Quran takes you right back to, if you really want to understand and keep time, this is how you do it. You use the constellations, because as you say, the sun and the moon are not reliable, right? So that's pretty much what is being said in the Quran too. So there's
don't attribute to me something that I got from somewhere else, because that's Herodotus told us that the ancient Egyptians did not trust the sun to keep the times. So they didn't go by the sun. This is why they had a year of 30 days. They observed the moon. And other civilizations didn't trust the moon either, so they only observed the turnings of the stars. But
absolutely.
The sun has changed its position 4 times in recorded history. So in the ancient world, just quit using the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if the people have any specific questions. I can absolutely try and sort of answer them. But there are many verses that sort of cover sort of time and calendars and stuff, right?
Oh no, we're going to get into Phoenix phenomenon, which covers calendars also.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a whole separate video. You got to come back on the channel, because I went through the PDF this morning.
That's been updated, PDF. By the way.
Hey, you have updated it? Yeah, because we got a whole video on Phoenix phenomenon in the Quran. So
I think that's what it is. But as an introduction, I think this is good, because people kind of get that I'm not coming from an angle where I'm trying to sort of promote Islam, or I'm saying, let's everyone become a happy clapping Christians or Muslims or whatever you want to call it. I'm very much coming from an errant perspective to say that, guys, there's knowledge here which has been distorted, but there's knowledge. So we can actually use that as arsenal to add to the body of weight of evidence that you've obviously collated to say, actually, this other scripture is also corroborating all these findings, and actually we can actually now add this body of text to that into the fold and say, well, actually this is agreeing with what we've found out, and actually we're going to forget about all the crap that we know that is crap, or all the stuff that is not important to us, and actually we can now start looking at that and making some of those analysis about and joining up some of those more of those dots. And I think I definitely would need your help for that, because it's all to do with the calendars. It's all to do with, these previous scriptures and the previous written record, because it's saying that everything that men have done is in the written record. Go and look at, and it actually is questioning the errant, because that's why I feel it's written to an errant, because it's actually asking you, have you gone and checked the previous knowledge? Do you see what I mean? So it's like, don't sit here and try and read me. Go and do the work first and then come read me, because this is someone who needs to have done all of that. That's going to actually understand what's written here about things like resets, about things that knowledge is hidden, about things that there's a whole universe and there's an immortal soul here, and you guys have powers, and this is how you control the energies around you. It talks a lot about astro-theology. So you find astro-theology throughout the book, right? So you've got lots and lots of references to the zodiac, to the constellations. There's a whole chapter called Constellations. So it has to be an important part of the construct for the book to keep calling it out, to say, listen, guy, you need to know about this stuff, right? Then it obviously goes in and talks about the design of the simulacrum. That's what's really interesting to me, because you talk about that a lot, that it's a design. And in the Quran, there's verses where it's saying that I have designed it such ways. So I've created a heaven, and in that heaven, meaning the sky, then there is, I've put like a design around it so you can see the signs. Why is it important for us to see those signs? And we know that it's because it's to wake us up to the fact that we are immortal beings. This is just an avatar. It says that. It says, I can, Muslims don't believe in reincarnation, but the Quran actually supports reincarnation. Now, when I bring that to a Muslim, he'll just put me in jail or have my head chopped off. I don't know, right? But that's the kind of responses that I get when you bring these topics, because you're so not allowed to talk about them. Astrology is from the devil. The same as exactly what you saw with Christianity. It's the same thing.
Wow, I would like to see just one surah or verse. Sure. If you'd email, not for this video, but I am about to do a video on reincarnation. It'll be my first one. I've been telling my community why I believe it. I don't believe it just because it's something fancy, but I have a logic train attached to that because of my beliefs in the oversoul and what I believe is that the oversoul has this spirit of equity, and that it's absolutely unfair to send a soul into the construct who dies at 3 years old because their parents are pieces of shit, and then that 3-year-old, that's their only shot at life, and they get judged beyond that because they were innocent. They get a free pass. There's no equity there at all. It's unfair on multiple levels. So I feel that we're living life sims, but I'm also willing to scientifically back that up because I've got some really compelling information that I've pulled from different sources that just doesn't make sense unless people have been living multiple lives. So that's a video I'll be doing in the near future. But you and I need to do a Phoenix phenomenon video.
We do. I mean,
that's not the only one. That's not the only one.
I can't share my screen, but I will, just so people can see very quickly. I'm not going to go through it all, but the kind of stuff I have. Hang on. I don't know how I'm going to do this.
So while you're looking for that, let me explain my appreciation for what the Arabic scholars, what the Islamic scholarship has brought to the table. Let me explain that while you're looking for that. Once you present something, I'll see it here and I'll be able to click it in. But this is more addressed to my community. Okay, I've told you guys in the past why I have an appreciation for the Islamic scholarship of 1,000 years ago, and the reason is almost everything you believe today, which is total bullshit, was already called out by the Islamic scholars 1,000 years ago. I have cited chapter and verse in my published books showing you that all these Arabic scholars had gone through the Egyptian, the Nabatean, the Sabaean accounts. They had gone through all the Libyan, the Mauritanian, even the old libraries of King Juba of Mauritania. These Arabic scholars had gone through the Greek, the Latin, they've gone through everything, and that they had access to amazing amounts of information because the Europeans had given them their books and sold them to them for food. They had all this, and for centuries, they built these amazing Islamic libraries, and these Islamic scholars published all these fantastic books, and in those texts, they specifically called it out. There were races of giants. There were. They didn't say angels came down and had sex with humans, but the Arabic scholars weren't known for their imagination. They didn't invent things. All they did was document facts. What scholarship will tell you today, which is the core chief characteristic of this massive transference of knowledge from the ancient Greek and Roman world into the Renaissance and into the Middle Age period, is because throughout the entire Dark Ages, knowledge died among white Europeans. Yeah. But among the Arabians, they preserved all this information. And what's fascinating is C. Staniland Wake published a book in the 1890s, and he showed hundreds of examples of all these ancient Arabic scholars preserving Greek text to the letter unchanged. Yeah. It's like they didn't have any wish whatsoever to alter any of these records. They just transferred them. That's all they did. And in these texts is reference after reference after reference after reference after reference that the Egyptians did not build the pyramids, that the Egyptians that we know of today are a culture and civilization that came way later.
Yeah.
And that pyramids were already half buried in the sand from a pre-cataclysm culture long before Egypt ever came into existence.
Absolutely.
This is what's on the books among the Arabic scholarship, and the Arab scholars cite their earlier sources.
Yeah.
But that's why I have a deep appreciation. Not just that, they expose a lot of the bullshit from the ancient world that we've assumed to be true. They were just itemizing the facts. They just wanted to know the facts and preserve them for the future. And it's not my observation. It's scholars like C. Staniland Wake and Gerald Massey and Robert Graves who are the ones that have published that we owe a debt to the Arabian scholarship from 1,000 years ago for the preservation of information unchanged. They literally just copied text and passed them on.
Yeah, similar to I guess what Gerald Massey's saying is this guy Roy Casagranda. So I definitely recommend if people want to know a bit more about this and as a background.
His name is Roy Casagranda. After the video, email me real fast.
I will email you with a list of resources that people can.
The list of his links and resources, because you mentioned him before this video started, and yeah. I'll just put, since you don't really have anything going, you're not really doing anything. You don't want your email out there. You did say that you were going to start a YouTube video.
I've got one measly video on my channel, but that's because you are my inspiration, Jason. It's because I've been doing this for about 20 years, right? My journey's long. I haven't just started on it. And, the journey is not just knowledge on the Quran. It's obviously gaining a lot of others. So there's a lot of material that I could bring to the forefront. And to be honest, a lot of the friends that I have, around me have been for years saying that, look, Affy, you should have a channel or something, do something. But, life. And plus, I'm not... I guess I've just never had that. I want to get the truth out there, but I will do that. I will send you the resources, and I think I want to make the effort because I think this is an important topic, and I think a lot of people can learn from it. So with your support and encouragement, I will definitely start putting more into my channel.
Yeah, well, any video that I do, I will send you a copy of, so you can just upload it to your own channel. So.
Cool. So, I made a new one. It's called Gnostic 786. It's a new one, a channel. I just created it. And I was like, okay, because 786 is like the code in Muslims for the prayer, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which basically just means in the name of Allah and blah, 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 blah. But actually, to me, it means something else. So I know the real meaning. Because I know the real meaning, because you see, that's a whole video in itself. What does Rahman and what does Rahim mean? It doesn't mean what they say, which is merciful and beneficial, but most beneficent or whatever. And Rabbul Alameen, like they say, it means Lord of the world or God of the world. Allah is, but Alameen, the root word is intelligence, like knowledge. He's not the God of the world. He's the God of intelligence. It is your conscious. Allah is your conscious. Everyone has an Allah. It's up to you whether you want to make the Allah great or you want to turn the Allah into a shaitan or iblis or whatever you want to do, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming from a channel perspective. So I think there's so many Muslims out there, and even non-Muslims who just, like they hate Muslims. I know for a fact when I go on groups just with my surname, people just straight away, when they hear the word Hussein, they're like, no, she's just a wrong un. We're not going to even entertain anything she has to say. So yeah, I think I do want to get things out there. I think I definitely need to have more chats with you. I think it'd be great if we can do a series of different sort of topics around that where I can bring those Quranic verses. I will send you whatever I have. I'm here to support you, Jason, because quite frankly, this is the only community where I'm comfortable. And I have to say a shout out to the community because I just think they're awesome people. I've made some amazing friends, and I definitely want to give a shout out to my two really good mates that I met through your community. One is Tiff. Hi, Tiff. We met at one of the meetups actually, and I want to say a big thank you to Ali Wilkins, who's done a fantastic job on Facebook. Sort of running all the groups and connecting people, and then also Mark Andrews, who is a good friend of mine as well, who I've met through one of them, and he's done a lot of work with me around the sovereignty stuff, which your guys in Alphabetic were talking about. So I'm going through a lot of that where I'm trying to really deal with the legal system right now. So I've got, he's been really helping me, and I'm sort of in a few battles around that at the moment. So it's just an amazing community. You're doing such an amazing job. And, you know, I'm so honored that I even have the privilege to talk about this stuff somewhere, because it's just been there in my head and in my spreadsheets and everything. And whoever's going to listen to me, I sort of talk to them about it. And when I do say it, most people, because of their stereotype of Islam, who are not Islamic people, like Westerners, they're just like, they just shut off, right? Because they just think it's some evil thing. And, you know, we're coming to take their, you know, the whole thing that happened in England, because obviously I live here and I went through that recently, you know, the riots and all that stuff.
And it was all premeditated. It was all paid for. It's just ridiculous.
On both sides, because you got the crazy guys, you know, who are in the, you know, who are the Muslim guys who are running on the riots on the streets, and then you've got your sort of far right guys, and then you've got horrible people like, sorry to say, people might get offended, but people like your Tommy Robinsons and, you know, those kind of people, because they are paid up. These are all paid opposition. Everything you see. So please, if you see a Muslim, if you're in the UK walking down the street, please don't be scared of them, because I'm telling you, as a person who grew up in the UK as a Muslim in the British Pakistani community, because that's my background from Pakistan, we really are just normal people who just want to get on with our life. We're not, most of the people aren't even that into the religion. Do you know what I mean? They're not even that into it. They're just trying to survive like everybody else. So, you know, don't sit there and think that they want to, you know, make everything a mosque and, you know, turn everything into Sharia and all of that. It's really not that way. It's a few select people who are creating these narratives. And as you have now alluded to, the fact that this is all second seal stuff, right?
It is, every bit of it. It's all the people at the top wiring all this shit up. Because you know what, the glue that sticks all this together is the understanding that it doesn't matter if you're Hindi, Farsi. It doesn't matter if you're somewhere in Armenia practicing a religion that the rest of us have never even heard of. It doesn't matter if you're Sunni, Islamic, whatever Christian fundamentalist, you know, Southern Baptist, Presbyterian, Lutheran. It doesn't matter if you're Mormon or Jehovah's Witness. It is absolutely my belief, and I believe that I can speak for the majority of my community, not everybody, but it's my belief that true spiritual individuals are among all these groups.
All of them.
And it's the only reason those groups even continue to be a viable force. And it's the bad seeds in those groups that give them all the bad rap. When actually there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it, any of that stuff. All over the world, it doesn't matter what language, what culture, or what religion, there are true spiritual participants everywhere. And all I'm trying to do in Archaix is provide a timeline where everybody can see how these things developed, ebbed and flow, and where they're going. Simple as that.
Yeah, I agree. I probably haven't got stuck to anything that I was supposed to say, but I think we've had a really good chat, and I think there's so much more. I mean, there's all the whole spreadsheet, obviously, with all the reset verses that talk about the reset, and I can't share my screen, but
I do the same thing. I
just need to give you one, because I want people to hear what the text actually saying, right? So we've got one, this is a good one, right? So I've just found this one, which is in my spreadsheet on the info on resets tab. So Surah 6 chapter, so that's chapter 6 verse 6. It says, do they not see how many a generation we have destroyed before their time, whom we had given a bountiful place on earth, the like of which we never gave unto you, meaning they were that advanced and they were that sort of had all of those sort of goods, and upon whom we showered heavenly blessings upon abundant, and at whose feet we made running waters flow, and yet we destroyed them for their sins and gave rise to other people in their stead. And then it goes, you know, there's other verses, 7:34, it says, to every people is a term appointed. When their term is reached, not an hour can they cause delay, nor can they advance. So the preciseness of the cataclysms that you obviously have brought forward.
The resets are on protocol. They're protocols. This is what I discovered in the Old Testament when the people the people, the Israelites were saying, hey, what are you going to do about these Amorites? The damn Amorites are controlling everything. They're doing everything. They control the trade routes, the sea routes, the ports. They're invading everybody. We got to pay taxes to them. What are we going to do about these damn Amorites? Amorite means Westerners. And they were talking about the Amuru, this new infrastructure that got overlaid the Middle East in the 18th, 17th, 16th century BC. The Amorites. When the Amorite in the Old Testament, this is addressed. And the answer from God was continue to do what you're doing, because at this time the sins of the Amorites are not yet full. When I saw that statement, I used my Spiros Zodhiates Key Greek Study Interlinear Bible. When I saw that word full, I went to the concordance, the lexicons. I traced that word full through the Bible. I couldn't believe it. It went straight to the book of Revelations when the vials were, when the bowls became full of the wrath of God and they were poured out onto human civilization. And I realized, wow, resets. These resets are real, but they're on specific timelines, meaning cultures, races, and socio-political systems, they have play to F up. I mean, they've got play. And even when they should get the hammer smashed on them, they still got play. The sins of the Amorites are not yet full, even though the Israelites were already fed up. And then it happened. The same imagery is found in the seven seals, because the fifth seal breaks after the four horsemen. The fifth seal breaks. And the same thing is told to the spirits that are in the altar, saying, hey, when you going to exact vengeance upon us, man? We did what we were supposed to do. We're stuck down here in this altar. We're waiting on our new bodies. What's going on? And God says, you need to be really, really patient. The time is almost here. And this is the elite running the world. They're messing up. They're screwing everybody over. This is the fifth seal of the apocalypse. And yet the oversoul is still saying, be patient. The sins of the Amorites are not yet full. So this concept that's in the Old Testament seems to also be in the Quran as well. That not only are there resets, but the resets are governed.
And this is really interesting. They're completely, and for me, what was so really came out to me was how it kept going on about how precise these times are and how it's inevitable that they're going to happen. So it's kind of giving you that information just like you had. And I hadn't, other than the Quran, really come across it in that way, other than when obviously I saw you and your work. And then I was like, Jesus, this is like in the Quran, or Muhammad, this is in the Quran. Do you know what I mean? So, it's saying the inevitable. And people will say, what is the inevitable? It is true. It is truly inevitable. The Thamud and the Ad disbelieved in the shocker. As the Ad, they were annihilated by a persistent, violent storm. He unleashed it upon them for 7 nights and 8 days, violently.
All my references to Phoenix for seven days. Now I got so many references to Phoenix that period lasts 7 days. Man, I got a bunch of them.
Exactly. And it says you could see the people tossed around like decaying palm trees. Now, the word palm trees, Phoenix.
Palm trees, Phoenix.
I knew you'd like that one.
You're not gonna miss me on that one.
I knew you were gonna like that one. There's so many of them though, Jason. It literally is like, whoa, okay, all right, okay. And then the next one, look, 51, chapter 51, 41. Anything that it came upon was utterly destroyed in Ad, right? Is a lesson. We sent upon them the disastrous wind. So there's different parts of the Quran where it comes back and it says the same thing, that it was a wind, it was a violent wind. So what I like about the Quranic stuff is it's giving us some specifics. Like there's some civilizations where it says it projectiles with, like in the Bible, it says, gives you some description. So it's definitely giving you those descriptions. But for me, the fascinating thing was how it kept going on about how precise the time and the term that's appointed, and how every people, there's a term that's appointed. And once they've reached that term, so that civilization, there will be a reset. They can't delay it. They can't do any of that. Another one I can give you, if you want, I can go on. Don't give me all the Phoenix ones. We're doing a video on that. All right, cool. I've got one whole thing on the people of the cave. That's really interesting. I've got evidence of the simulation. I've got there's a one here. I'm not sure if this is going to be exactly. I think I'll have to go in and do some typing on here. But okay, so check this out, Affy. We already hit 2 hours and 6 minutes. I know. I am now listening to
listen, I'm now listening to you as someone who is trying to fill up a video with more and more information, when prior to the video, oh, Jason, I'm so nervous. I've never been on YouTube like this before. Please go easy on me.
Yeah, but you see, I'm so active in the comments. I probably piss loads of people off if I'm really. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Yeah, you're real active on social media, but this is your first big kind of like podcast.
Only Facebook I'm active on, and Dino. Shout out to Dino. He especially said, no, don't forget to shout us out on the live, Affy. But Dino is doing a fantastic job as well on Facebook. So I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I don't
talking about Facebook or Telegram.
Just I am actually on the Telegram group, but I'm just not that active. The only thing I'm really active on is Facebook, and I have an Instagram which doesn't have anything to do with. It's just me doing philosophical sort of memes and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know Dino. I guess Dino on Facebook might be the same one, but Dino on Telegram.
Yeah.
Man,
Dino, the guy who runs your errant universe on.
That's not mine; it's his. But he's done such a fantastic job. You know what I mean? He's a beast. He's like, you know what? He's the man. I love Dino.
I really like him. I like his vibe because he's so like that. He's very he cuts off all the bullshit. So when people are sort of like in their emotions, and he's like, nah, cut it out. Like I like.
Hey man, life's too short for all that BS. And a lot of times, you know. I don't tell them how to run Telegram. That's theirs. They're mature about it. They know what to do. You know, people want to vent. That's cool. I don't care. Here on Archaix, I run too tight of a ship. And that's because I know a lot of people who are venting are actually attacking, passive-aggressive attacks.
I know.
So, yeah, I don't have time for that, man. Yeah, if I don't go to Walmart to aisle 4 and stand there looking stupid, complaining to people that I don't like what I'm looking at. If I don't like aisle 4, I'm going to go to aisle 6. It's the same thing as YouTube. It's the same thing as YouTube. You don't like what you are, move around. Who wastes their time? Who wastes their time in an environment complaining about something when no one's making you stay in that environment? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and a friend of mine would normally say, well, but the amount of time he spent saying that, he could have done 10 push-ups.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean? He could have like done something productive with his own self. But yeah, okay. So I think this is a good intro. It's 2 hours, 15 minutes. I mean, I can go on, but
you're not going on. I got to stop you now. Yeah, this has been a fantastic video, and it went far smoother than you had anticipated, didn't it?
I was so crapping it. Sorry for the British lingos here, but honestly, I was bricking it. And
well, I already knew you were going to do good.
I kept sending messages going, I'm really nervous, Jason. But yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And apologies if I've offended anyone, and that's not the intention at all. But yeah, I have all this.
Shit, offending people's kind of like, the job. It's you're always going to offend somebody. There is never a video I've done where somebody wouldn't offend.
I'm a PhD in offending people, so yeah. But thank you so much. I'll definitely send you the links, and if there's any questions, I do have a email address which is ziggydiego77@gmail.com, but I will write it for you because it's separate to the one we talk on. I'm going
to tell you now. You've been on Archaix, so if I put your email in the description box with these links, I'm going to tell you now. You're probably going to get a lot of podcast requests. People want to talk to you. Okay. So I'm just going to tell you now. I'm going to send Guido after you if you do the Phoenix stuff on anybody else's show before you come and do it on mine.
I'm just a
Guido yet.
I'm a noob, as my son would call me. I'm a noob, so I don't know anything. You can be my guide, and I trust you because I trust your work. So if you endorse something, I will definitely look at it. But I don't. If you can, please don't give the email that I email you on. So the email I'm now repeating is the one that people can email me on, which is Ziggy Diego, my cat's name, 77@gmail.com. So yeah, I'm not Spanish or anything like that, but Ziggy Diego 77@gmail.com. You can speak to Affy.
Well, do me a favor, Affy. I'm about to exit you from the studio so I can run my outro. This has been a great video. I'm very impressed with Affy. And guys, I have a whole file of stuff she sent me, and we didn't even touch it. So we got some more videos to do. Now, please send me an email, Affy, right now with your email, the email you want to use, and the links to that guy that you're sourcing for your material. And I'll put because other people have been asking in the comments, who is this guy you're talking about? And we'll see you next time. And I'll send you an email. I'll send you an email soon to reschedule.
Cool. See you guys. Bye.
Later. That's a great girl. That was a very impressive video, guys. Very impressive. I'm impressed with Affy. I didn't know what I was walking into. I just knew that she was very knowledgeable. And one-on-one, we had already done a conference, and her communication impressed me. Her ability to communicate what she was thinking and what she was saying. So I kind of knew she was going to do good, but she actually did way better than expected. So I'm believe me, if you guys want to see her back, well, it really doesn't even matter what you want. I'm bringing her back because we got to talk about that Phoenix phenomenon, because she sent me an awesome PDF about it from the Quran. So we'll be doing that too. And I'll post her links. Virginia Beach, if you're a local and you're curious and you want to show up, we are taking cash at the door. You might have to email Dawn to see. I don't know, like 20 seats left. I don't know. We sold a lot more than we anticipated. It's going to be a bigger event than I thought. But we're going to have a blast. And this is my very first whiteboard ever. I'm bringing a big board, got all the markers, the easel, I got everything, because I have to show output. I will be showing my laptop. I'm going to blow some minds. I'm going to show you guys that there is absolutely a mathematical structuring to our reality. It has predictive value, and it can be applied to every situation in your life. So I've been working on this project for 6 years. You guys know about it. I've talked about it many times. Opus was supposed to fund Archaix. Opus was supposed to be sold, and it never happened. And instead, we wrapped it around something else. Then we had it recoded. Then we introduced security protocols. And then next thing you know, Archaix blew up. And then next thing you know, money from Archaix is funding Opus and a new coder, somebody who really knows what we were trying to accomplish. So crazy. Just the opposite happened. So Virginia Beach, that's what we're going to be discussing. Archaix principles, how to apply them personally to your life. And then I'm going to show you what's happening in the arithmetic and how to choose the exact days in your personal future when nature is moving with you and not against you. And with that, I'm going to hit my outro. Cole, give me a couple minutes and I'm going to post all our links in the description box. All right. Let's see here. Love you guys.